Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Aaron Marcus, and I am really excited about this show. It's the secrets to auditioning for film, TV, and pilots online workshop. And we've got two great guests. My very first guest, I am so excited to have here. His name is Michael Wallach, who I have met many years ago, and he's just one of the truly nice people in the industry. Forget all the successes and all the things that he's done in the industry, but when you run into people who just have good hearts and really care about people, and people who work very hard to help other people, that's a treasure to find. And so, Michael, first of all, thank you so much for being here
Oh,
today.
you're welcome. It's a
And so
pleasure.
let me just briefly tell you about Michael. I mean, it's always kind of weird to, try to sum up somebody's life in a couple of sentences, but just so you have a general idea of some of the experiences that he's had, I just want you to know about them. He started off, passing the bar in New York and started working for RCA Records. Went on to Columbia TV in LA, started getting involved as a personal manager, which he's done for over 20 years. And also, let me just check my notes. Yeah, vice president. He was vice president of the National Conference of Personal Managers, which is a great association for personal managers. And he also wrote a book, How to Get Arrested. And I know you're probably thinking, well, this guy's attorney. Why is he talking about how to get arrested? He's trying to make more money. No, this is how to break into the Hollywood market, how to break into LA, especially for people who are moving to LA and really trying to enter the industry. And you definitely want to check out his book. You can go to howtogetarrested.com. And let me just double check. I think that is the correct website, howtogetarrested.com, and take a look at the book. So, Michael, here's what I would like to do to get started. Instead of
Okay.
getting right into discussing, you know, ideas, techniques, strategies for auditioning, since we have the option of having you here, I'd love to have you just kind of like quickly explain, what does a manager do, and when is the time to start looking into management?
Okay. First of all, when I started, there were maybe 300 managers. 300 managers you could find, you could locate. There must be thousands and thousands of managers. So many people have managers these days. But the difference between an agent and a manager is really uh, what I believe you're asking. Let's look at it this way: an agent that has many, many clients, could have tens of clients, hundreds of clients in an agency, versus a manager that has but a handful of clients. So if a manager only has, say, 5, 10, 15 clients, there must be something different between the two. Uh, there are some overlapping things. However, what a manager does is, as they say, advise and guide. The manager is more involved with the person's career. Agents really used to dislike managers and vice versa because a manager might want to take a client to another agency. Um, but now the agent is for the most part working on volume and has so many clients and just wants to try to um, procure auditions and jobs for the talent. A manager does that plus so many other things. Since there are just a few clients that the manager has, the manager will want to be involved with everything from um, securing the auditions to really spending time on pictures and resumes. And a good manager knows what a good picture is, what picture will sell to the casting director and the producer. Manager may be involved with business management when things are going, may be involved with law, may definitely be involved with publicity. where there are publicists, but not everybody needs a publicist. Even if you're on a series, you might not need a publicist. A good manager is going to be involved with the client's publicity, and uh, deal as the publicist by spending time with the studio and people that are involved in getting publicity. Managers involved with things these days, such as so many things are online, uh, social networking type of things, and everything that was is so different now in terms of the breakdowns, which are the list of roles that are available each and every day. Most of the roles are on these breakdown services. Well, the manager is now submitting electronically, and uh, so everything is done through that electronically now. And but the manager, the question you're asking is, the manager is so involved with the client's career. A good manager knows everything that's going on with that client, including their spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, friends. They seem to know things because they know what will be necessary in order to help the client get jobs and go further. Everything is involved.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing too is, and you brought up an interesting point, it's the manager who will also help decide on whether a certain project is really going to be good for your actor, for your
Yes.
talent, because you're looking more big picture, no pun intended. You're looking really for the down the road kind of decision making, whereas an agent might be looking more here and now. Hey, I can make a 10% commission fee, assuming it's a union job, and let's just book this thing. And you might be saying to your client, you know what? Yeah, this would be an interesting job for you, but it's really taking you into the wrong direction. Or, you've already done these kinds of jobs before, and I don't want to see you continue to keep only taking these kinds of jobs. So my advice would be turn it down and let's look for something else. So I guess that's also another difference between a manager and an agent because you're really looking long term.
Well, as I say, advice and guidance in terms of the short term, but also the long term, as you're saying. So when a client gets going, you want to be aware of, you want to be more careful with the things that they're doing. Not to say, I mean, I have different philosophies than most people have, in that you can do the same thing a number of times. That may be good. Not because you've done it before doesn't mean you can't do it again. Because somebody, if I can elaborate, somebody who, say, plays a similar role 4 or 5 times might get known for that role. And then you can branch out and cross over into other roles, as opposed to spreading yourself so thin that um, uh, as a result, nobody, or certain casting directors, aren't going to know you. But if they know you for something and you've got the right representation, they can help push you into other things. But it's better to be known for something than not known at all.
You
But
know, and,
all work, see, to me, all work is good. Everybody can make it, but I'll, I'll, I'll wait for your
yeah,
questions.
no, it's interesting because I have the exact same philosophy. Look, I know most actors have this mentality of I don't want to get pigeonholed. I don't want to only be considered for one thing. My feeling is pigeonhole me all you want. I have a certain look, I have a certain style, and not to say that every once in a while I might get cast in something that you wouldn't expect. Yes, that does happen. Being a bouncer at a strip club that I did for a TV show, that was very unusual for me, and I was kind of shocked that I was brought in for it. As it turns out, I read it pretty well, and with the right wardrobe and stuff, I pulled it off. However, most of the
Right.
time, I'm going to get booked as, the doctor, the nice guy, the insurance salesman, the teacher. I get it. Typically, I'm not the motorcycle gang guy. So I am very happy about being pigeonholed. And actually, and I agree with your philosophy 100%. I guess the only thing I was thinking, maybe there's a certain role that could be detrimental to somebody's career that you might say, you know what, I don't think that would be a good strategic move for you. So I just kind of wanted to clear that up because I do like,
Yeah, no, that can happen, and but also not necessarily the character that you're playing, but if, say, you've just been a series regular and you're doing TV movies or features and things, and then you're offered a very small role, while sometimes in the past it wouldn't hurt you. You don't want to minimize yourself, so you do want to keep the train going. Um, uh, so you do want to be careful.
yeah,
In other words, I mean that's just common sense.
yeah. And is there a certain point that you would recommend that somebody does look into getting a manager, or do you think is it not 100% necessary depending on where you live?
Well, definitely, it does depend upon where you live, because if you live in an area where there aren't that many roles or opportunities, there aren't that many productions there, um, one representative will probably suffice. But when you're in an area like Chicago and New York and LA, um, uh, maybe even Miami and Dallas, uh, San Diego and San Francisco, you might want a manager too. Um, because there are so many things going on, the agent that deals with so many clients is not going to be able to spend the time or the thought processes in order to help the actor. So you do want a manager to be pushing the agent and also to be simultaneously um, getting auditions for the client. And managers do that more than they ever did. They should, and there are legal issues about that, but I won't go into that now
Right.
unless you wanted to hear it. But um, I think for every, I started by saying that there were few managers and now there are many. It's because that agent really wants the manager to take care of it, just wants to call the manager with an appointment and make sure the manager finds the client, gets the client prepped and prepared for the audition, and every aspect of it, from acting and acting teachers and coaches to the resume, the picture, um, how to get there quicker, changing the appointment to a better, more convenient time. Like in LA, one of the biggest concerns is traffic. It's a logistical problem. You can go from living in a Marina Del Rey or Santa Monica and have to go, if you know the area, way up to Burbank or Glendale. In traffic, it could take you an hour and a half, 2 hours. So there are all kinds of concerns like that. And what makes somebody drive for a long time could frustrate somebody. So their chances of getting the job may be less. If they're physically a mess, they're mentally a mess. There are so many aspects of getting that job that a good manager is going to take care of. In addition, as I say, getting the appointments
Well,
and
now,
negotiating the deals.
so before we get into some of the specifics of the auditioning part, I was just wondering.
Okay.
So when you were talking about pushing for your client, if your client goes to the audition, let's say they've got callbacks, they book the job, who does the casting director call? Do they call the agent or do they call the manager first to to start
Well,
talking to them?
ordinarily, if you're saying if they want to hire the client,
Yes.
they'll ordinarily call the agent. Um, they might call the manager because they want to deal with the manager, or they don't even know that an agent is involved. I mean, there's so many people, the volume is so great. But let me just get to one little point. Some people say it really matters if I have a known agent or a known manager. When a producer, casting director wants the talent, they don't care who represents the person. They don't care if it's William Morris or if it's Joe Smith Incorporated. They don't care. They just want the talent. It's not, and uh, along those lines, if they see a good talent, they don't care where the talent comes from. In fact, I would say, literally 95% of all actors on series and doing supporting or lesser roles on feature films come from very small agencies, um, and sometimes small management companies. It's when somebody really gets going that they move to, say, a larger agency, and either the person is so surrounded with other people like them that they never get another audition, or unless that phone is ringing, nothing happens. So you want to be with that, going back to what a manager does, a manager who has that vested interest, who really cares about you, is going to be there for you and is going to keep fighting and knows who likes you in terms of which casting directors and producers, and knows what you're good at, what you can do, what you've done, and can really keep the ball moving. And if they know about deals, can make better and better deals and be aware of, not only the money but the credit, which to me is as important as the money, in the dressing room, and all kinds of things.
Sure. So, okay, so as far as the audition process goes, so
Okay.
let's say, you've got a client, you see the breakdowns, send the person out, they are preparing to go to this particular audition. What do you do with your client to help prepare them, whether it's a TV show or a film or a pilot? What kind of things would you or other, great managers do to help prepare their talent? I mean, would you
Well,
actually sit there and read with them? Would you, help them
no, I don't.
analyze?
I don't. I'm sure there are some managers, and I've known of some managers that will do that. I don't do that. I know good acting when I see it. I know bad acting when I see it. But I'd rather have a client that has a handle on the material, because that's the most important thing, is able to have a handle on the material. But I very often I'll send a client to an acting coach or an acting school if it's on a more long-term basis. But per audition, there may be an acting coach involved. I will discuss often enough what the actor is going to be wearing, because the most important thing is to be a really good actor for the audition, and also you want to look like the role. And there's another aspect of strength of character and confidence and all, commanding the room in a way that makes somebody get the job or not.
Yeah, and also it certainly seems like one of the kisses of death that some actors have when they go into an audition is they're nervous, they're scared, they apologize. Sometimes they want to book the job so badly that
Right.
that uncomfortability is seen by everybody in the room. That nervous tension is seen and felt by everybody in the room. And the reality is, if you are, a casting director, you're a director or producer, whatever your involvement is, you want to work with people who have confidence. And so I would think that that's one of the key things for anybody going into an
Exactly right,
audition.
Aaron. And I was going to say that if, say, it's a pilot audition, a particular reason why somebody wants to go in and feel good about themselves, have confidence, or fake it, it doesn't really matter. The idea is to get the job. But if, say, you're going into a pilot, uh, it doesn't. All auditions are similar, but pilots are that much different, because if you're going in for a pilot, presumably, if the pilot sells, your option will be picked up. You'll become a series regular. So those casting directors, particularly the directors and producers, the network, they want to make sure that that person has something, that inner thing, that confidence or whatever it is, so that they can stay with the series for the 8 to 20 episodes per year, possibly for 5 years. So they don't want to hire somebody without that confidence, without that uh, feeling good about themselves, without them being able to relate to other actors on a regular basis, a different director every episode, um, be able to handle publicity. I mean, the most important thing is you got to look right for the role and be a really good actor so they can give you the role. But if it's a pilot and it's a more long-term basis or a movie that's going to shoot for 10 weeks, they want to make sure that person has that something so that they can they're a self entity.
Sure.
Everybody's a self is self-employed as an actor, and you've got to be a self-starter and be somewhat strong in yourself, even as I say in the book. In fact, at times you want to fake it till you make it. You just want to. It
Now,
doesn't matter. It doesn't. The idea is to get the job.
and it's interesting with pilots, and honestly, I don't remember the statistics, and I don't know if you happen to know them offhand. Like in general, how many pilots are shot throughout the year, and how many of those actually end up making it on air?
Well, okay, it depends. It used to be when there were three major networks: ABC, NBC, CBS, and then Fox. Um, they could shoot anywhere from give or take 20 pilots a piece. So that's 80 pilots. Uh, Now things have changed with um, premium cable and so many other networks from HBO and Showtime and FX and Lifetime making series and Hallmark making series and MTV making series, sitcoms and dramas. They're all doing it now. So besides that, pilot season is now, and this has got to be an upcoming question or thought. Pilot season is all year round now. Primarily February, March, April, May, but it's all year round. But I'm sorry, could you come back to that question?
Yeah,
What were you
so
saying?
basically, so in
I got
today's
off on a
time
tangent.
period, there must be, I would assume, way over 100 pilots shot.
Way, way over. That's what I was saying. With all the networks, the some networks will just make one or two. You'll find that um, with say, let's say Netflix, which does the Kevin Spacey series now. I think that it was like one and done,
Yeah, I don't even
or
think they had
one
to
or
shoot a
two and
pilot.
done. But hmm?
I don't even think they had to shoot a pilot for that one. I think the
No,
deal was
I think when Kevin Spacey agreed to it, he said it's a series or nothing. Don't bother me with.
right, and I think that's how it
I want
started.
a great show, and I want it to be a series. And as far as I know, for 2 seasons they gave him his production company $100 million, and he just allocated it the way he wanted to. So all the network cares about is deliver me a show,
So in
a
today's
great
time,
show.
do you even have any guesses out of the hundreds of pilots that might be shot, how many get picked up and actually begin
Oh,
to air? Is
well,
it like
let's see. On the
30 or
as I was
something like
saying,
that?
on the networks, the way it used to be when they said did 20 pilots, they might pick up 3 or 4 shows, something like that. The odds are not very good unless you're dealing with a network like a Nickelodeon um, that might do 3 pilots or 4 pilots. They'll probably pick up 3 out of 4 of them
Hmm.
because they don't want to waste the money. They want to go with something that's going to work or they think will work. And
Yeah,
HBO is not going to do an abundant amount of pilots. They'll do mostly the pilots that will get picked up.
got it.
So it's very hard to say. It depends on the network and how many pilots they're making.
And I was wondering about this. If some and you hear about this happening, and I'm sure it's not that unusual, where there's an actor gets cast, does the pilot, and for whatever reason, they decide to replace that actor when the
Yes.
show gets picked up, which that must be heartbreaking, especially if it turns out to be a hit show. How does that work? Does
It's one of the toughest things that can happen for an actor and their representation. And I can just say sometimes between an agent and a manager, uh, the manager's given the job of telling the actor, and the agent really doesn't want to get involved.
I'll
Okay,
bet.
but
So if that does happen, the actor
right.
only, I'm assuming, only got paid for the
I think you just
pilot.
heard my dog
That's
in the
okay.
background.
Maybe your dog has a response to that question. I don't
He
know.
is
Maybe.
so upset when an actor doesn't get that series after doing the pilot. Little George, he's amazing.
Hey, so if that does happen though, does that actor receive any kind of fees once it, you know?
Now, the way it goes is this. Let's say you do a pilot for a network. You do a pilot, you sign a contract that says you'll do the pilot for this or that, and in the event we pick it up, we have the option to pick you up. And if we do, you will get X amount of dollars for each episode. So if you do the pilot, they pick up the series, but they decide not to pick up the particular actor or forget about that character or they just want to make a change. The actor does not get paid. The
Wow.
actor got paid for the pilot, but the only but there is one difference, of course, between a pilot and just doing an episode or the episodic price. When you do a pilot, since the network has contracted for your exclusivity, in other words, if you do a pilot, you can't do another pilot for somebody else. The studio wants to make sure that you're going to be available and they have an exclusive on you in the event they do pick up the series. So you are paid to do the pilot, and ordinarily you're paid much more than the usual pilot fee because they're buying your exclusivity for give or take six to 12 months. So
Got it.
you're getting more. But if it gets picked up, no, you will ordinarily, and 99% of the cases, you will not
Yeah.
get anything else unless
And
that's built into your deal.
and I want to ask you one last question before we open it up and allow other
Oh,
people to
sure.
ask questions. And look, I'm not looking for specific numbers, but I think people would be really interested in this. You know, if somebody, and I'm not talking about a star, just somebody, whether they're just getting started or whether they've been working for a while, but not anybody who's well known. They get picked up. They're working on a network series. Can you give us like just a general ballpark idea? What kind of fees could somebody expect to make if they are a regular on a network series?
Okay, based upon the type of actor you're saying, not a star,
Right.
but somebody who's either been working or brand new, um, anywhere from $5,000 an episode to $12,500 an episode. Okay, and then the key is how many you guaranteed, whether or not they make those shows. Uh, and the issue is how many they end up doing. They could do 8 shows a year or 20 shows a year, and then there'll be residuals and things like that, and
Right.
everything else that comes from having a series.
Right.
I just had a client who she basically had no credits whatsoever. Uh, she had recurred on a Nickelodeon show that I got her. I hate that expression that I got her.
You submitted her for and pushed her
She,
for
she
it.
did 4 or 5 episodes of one of their shows, and she ended up booking a pilot, and they shot 20 shows. She got 8,500 a show. So she
Wow.
was new, playing 16ish. Um, um, yeah. Oh, yeah, but the only difference is when she did the pilot, unlike getting more than the episodic price for a pilot because they have your exclusivity, I think she got around not 8,500, $9,000 because that's Nickelodeon and it was take it or leave it. But it ended up very well because she did 20 shows.
That's incredible.
And she had no credits. She had come from Atlanta. Her mother brought her here from Atlanta. She had done high school plays in Atlanta and maybe a short film or two, very short. um, and um, and she did well.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So
Hey,
that's it. That's what they pay.
hey, Joel, I just wanted to ask if we could just set aside a few minutes for some questions from people.
Absolutely. Yes. So I've got a question here, Michael, from Lisa in Charlotte.
Oh, I'm not going to see Lisa. I'm just
No, they're
asking a
not going to be. No
question.
one's going to
Okay,
be on the webcam. People are
that's
writing in,
fine. That's fine.
and I'm going to read it for them. If somebody raises their hand, we can unmute them. They can talk on the air. But
Oh,
as far
okay.
as
So Lisa from
typing in
Charlotte.
question,
Okay.
as a manager, do you hear back from the casting director about your talent's audition, whether it was good or bad?
Uh, well, first the simple answer is sometimes you do, particularly if the client is newish and the casting director likes the talent. They might call up and go, "You have a winner there. That looks really good." But on the question of feedback in general, this is my point of view. Most actors will want feedback for everything, particularly when you're newish. I think it's always good to have feedback, but the one thing that an actor should not do, in my opinion, is if you go into an audition and you don't really feel you did well, do not request feedback. Because if your agent or manager goes and gets that feedback, the only thing you're going to end up doing if you did as poorly as you thought, you're only going to remind the casting director that you did poorly. So they're going to think like, oh yeah, she didn't do very well, this and that. So what are your chances of getting back in? Or what have you? And then of course, when a casting director doesn't like somebody, they sometimes talk to another casting director. Just like when they like somebody, they have a network of friends. They'll be talking to people. So feedback, yes, sometimes I get it. Sometimes I want to get it. But in general, the casting director does not just fall naturally. You have to ask, for the most part, you have to ask for it. But I would just say be careful. Don't ask for it if you don't think you did well.
Okay, thank you. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Deidre from Boston. Deidre, if I didn't pronounce your name right, I apologize. She writes, how can I tell what schools or teachers in my area would be good to study with for film and TV work?
Well, it's funny when you mentioned Boston. I was thinking I went to law school in Boston, and I lived at. I remember the address 68 Marlborough Street, which was one block away from Emerson, the well-known college for entertainment and actors. But that's a tough question. Um, the key to everything, particularly when you're beginning, is you just ask around, and sounds corny, you go with your gut. And just know that you might be wasting some time, but you'll learn something and you could always make changes. If you go with the wrong agent, you can make a change. There are things you can do. You just got to experience things. It's like anything in life. Just start it going. In terms of finding the right coach, obviously, if you can meet with the coach or the acting teacher and see if you get the right feel about them. Um, that's it. I don't personally know of anybody up there, but you just got to feel it out, like so many things in this business.
And just to kind of add to that too, if it is a school, maybe you can find out if you can audit a class,
That's
and
good.
maybe
That's
talk
good.
with
I like that.
yeah, and talk with other actors. Maybe even talk with a number of different agents. Maybe call the union office. They certainly won't give you a specific name of somebody, but they might give you a list of people that they
That's true.
know. So I think
And
those would be
and
some places. But Michael, I
and
really
in
like
line
your
with that, go to every seminar you can and
yeah.
talk to as many people as you can and hear them talk about people and things and try to get into the conversation or learn that way. So that's the best way to do it. If that was the question, how
Yeah.
do I find?
Yeah, how to
Uh,
find talent. No, that
yeah,
was good.
right.
Joel, do we have time for just squeezing one, maybe one more?
Yep, absolutely. Here's one more. Andy from Nebraska. He asks, should I search for an agent or manager prior to moving to Los Angeles or wait until I relocate?
No, definitely. You mean in order to finding an agent in Los Angeles or manager in
I
Los
think that's what he
Angeles?
means. Yeah, before he gets there, should he have something lined
Well,
up
for
or
the
should he
most
just
part,
hit
it's
the
not going
ground?
to happen. It can't hurt to submit yourself electronically or by regular mail, and maybe interest some people in advance. But it's you're not going to get signed until you have a face-to-face meeting and people know you. And so I wouldn't even think about that. But if I can just offer something real quickly, because most of the questions here are coming from out of towners that may move to LA or some other city. um, if the people listening are not aware of it, and some people are, it's a free service called actorsaccess.com, uh, for professionals who pay a subscription fee every month. It's the breakdowns, but Actors Access gives you many roles, not all of the roles, but in different cities throughout the country. So you can join, say, Actors Access in New York or in the Southeast someplace, or in Texas or in Chicago. And so you can find as many things, you can find most of the things that are going on in your locale, as opposed to only uh, making that only looking when, say, you're already in Los Angeles. So you can potentially get some credits, get yourself on film, get the experience, get the feel for it by going to this actorsaccess.com, which is free, and uploading your pictures and things like that. I think it's free, or it's
Michael,
very
actually, it's funny
inexpensive.
you mentioned that because towards the end of this workshop, I'm going to give a list of a number of places like Actors
Mm-hmm.
Access, 800 Casting, a bunch of these
Great.
places where you can get research. So everybody attendings will get a chance to see the actual list. But yeah, and that's really helpful. You can sign up free and then you pay every time you submit yourself, or you can pay a small fee and
Okay.
then you have unlimited submissions throughout the day. And yeah, Michael,
And
I
that way
just want to
you're kind of in the game without having to already be in LA, and you can decide if you don't want to continue as an actor, or you can get credits and go further in your area, because they do shoot movies all over the country. There are everything from some TV shows shot throughout the country, and there are plays and commercials and things like that. So you can actually accomplish things by finding out what's in your area, as opposed to just looking in
hey,
online someplace at the newspaper. Go to Actors Access.
Hey, Michael, I wanted to
Very cool.
thank you so much for taking the
Oh, you're
time
welcome.
and sharing
Thank you.
your experiences, your information. It's
Anytime.
really incredible. And I hope that our paths cross again really soon in the near future.
I look forward to
Thank
seeing
you,
you.
Michael.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye
Okay, it
bye.
was great. Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hey,
Hey. So let me
hello,
tell
good to see you.
everybody about Kimberly Scrum. First of all, she's fantastic. Kimberly, I don't know, are you president or owner? I don't know what your exact title is. King, queen, I don't know, of Kimberly Scrum
Uh,
Casting.
yeah, I would say chief cook and bottle washer. No, but I guess I could be the founder in that I quite by accident after working for another company, then just kind of left and started a company, with the support of actors though. So
Well, for those of you who have not had an opportunity to audition with Kimberly, it's an incredible experience because unlike well, maybe I should just put it this way. Kimberly is a actors casting director.
Cool.
She knows actors, she knows acting, and when you get somebody who can speak your language, it makes all the difference in the world, and she will bring out the best of any audition that you get. Doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but she will bring out the best of what you can do in there, as opposed to other people who sometimes just use words that don't make any sense to us and just we can't relate to. But let me just say a couple things about you, and then I want to get
Mm.
into asking some questions about auditioning. So uh, Kimberly's been in casting since 1990, I believe, and you've been casting
Yes.
everything from TV, film, radio. Your most current project, and it's funny, we were just talking about House of Cards
Hmm.
just a minute ago, which for anybody who has not seen this Netflix show, it's a phenomenal. It's just a phenomenal show, and so anyhow, I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add about you or your history.
Well, I think what you led with is probably one of the most important things. It's certainly I am an actor's casting director, and that I do know acting, and that I studied acting. So hail to American University acting program. And I think through that I learned a love of the craft. And it was not that I necessarily ever wanted to do it, but I think that knowing that has been extremely valuable. And after 20 years of, on top of the experience I had just studying and doing, the act of acting, that you incorporate other people's learning techniques, so that I understand Meisner, I understand, Stanislavski, I've got them all. So it's having my bag of tricks as well, much like an actor needs to have a bag of tricks. I have the bag of tricks to return back to you when we're auditioning. So,
So let me just start off with this question
mhm.
for people who are wanting to get known to a casting director, and let me
Mhm.
just talk about you specifically. How would somebody basically get on your radar so that they're hoping that you will think about them when you are doing some casting?
Well, it's of course it's always very specific. Every casting director has their own way that you should get in touch with them, and I tend to, I guess, having studied acting and understand the life of an actor, tend to be a little more open than most people would be. And I still, though, because I'm old, love snail mail, and I'm happy to still have those hard copies because it's nice to just sit and look through them. But electronic is absolutely unbelievably an easy way to go now, because no matter what, wherever you are, if somebody calls for something immediately, you can help them. So I think doing both. It's sending that letter in that package, and it's great to see, but too long of a letter is too much to read. So something short, sweet, and concise is always best. And no note to me seems very impersonal, but yet there is some people who will send things with no notes because they've been told no notes, don't send anything I have to read. So it's trying to actually, I guess, do a little bit of homework on what the person likes to take in the data and then doing it. But for me, a quick short note, a hard copy is fantastic, but also sending that electronic one with your headshot and resume is fantastic. And just generally speaking, whenever an actor's sending an email at all, you should have in your signature your photo. So, you get hundreds of them every time. It's name and face, name and face, name and face. I mean, do some study in marketing, and it's recall advertising. So the more times they've seen your name and your face, and particularly together, they'll remember who you are. So I think those two ways are great. And postcards are a great way still to get in touch with people. It's your face coming back in front of them and letting them know that you're working. So it's your excuse to be in touch without, being in touch for no reason. So it's at least there's a purpose to it. And again, the same thing I think via email, as long as they're short, quick, and to the point, but always having your photograph in there, I think is really critical.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, as far as auditioning, when you mentioned electronic mailing, I mean, I
Uh-huh.
find that I'm doing more and more online auditions in certain markets, not in
Right.
most markets, and for certain projects. For House of Cards, is that something, if somebody does not live anywhere near the DC area, is that something that you would accept, or is that not going to work for you?
It actually is acceptable, which is very funny for me because this, for me on House of Cards, it was the first time ever with this whole video casting thing, because I'm so used to, and again, having studied acting a long time ago, I'm used to that in-person experience. But there really is a value to that videotaping. In the end of the day, the end user is viewing you on camera. So why wouldn't you actually want to see how people are on camera? So I think it's a great opportunity for people if you're not in an area, if you happen to be out of town on a day of an audition, that at least if you can get that in as the preliminary, and even if you and your self tape have not done a great job, you're at least showcasing your talent. And maybe then when you are available to come into the casting office to actually, audition with the casting director, you'll have that opportunity. But at least it's a great entree to being seen. And in some cases, people have been cast off of those exclusively, even from a self tape. So I think it's a new technique that really is valuable.
And
I was
just
a little skeptical at first, I must say, because it
Sure.
seemed impersonal and was missing out on that interaction. But the end user result is just, this small box. So why not see it from the get go?
Well, I can tell you for someone who does, a pretty good amount of online auditioning as well as in-person auditioning, when I'm auditioning with a great casting director, that's
Mm-hmm.
always my number one choice. Even though I know sometimes
Right.
people will say, yeah, but if you're auditioning from home, you don't like that take, you don't have to send it, and so you can always
Mm-hmm.
get the one that you really like, you'll be more
Yeah.
relaxed and all. Yeah, of course, all those things are true, but what I always find is that there's information that I will get from a great casting director that I simply wouldn't know on my own. And there might be a little subtle hint. There might be something in a
Mm-hmm.
backstory, something in a relationship with, character that I just
Right.
wouldn't know in this particular
Mm-hmm.
script. So if I have the choice, I
Right.
always want to read live with a casting director. But certainly, if it's something that's very far from me and I really don't want to, drive 20 hours up and back for an audition, yeah, then I will do that. I mean, typically I have to go for a callback in person anyway, but um,
Right.
you know, just to let people know, when you call them in and they are going to
Mm-hmm.
be reading for a role, what kind of information are they given ahead of time? So sides are typically, which is the short portion of the script that people will be auditioning with. Typically, will people receive the sides or do they not even see them until they walk into your office?
It depends on the project. With a typical project, I always actually, even from, or the early days of 1990 casting, back long even before electronic and you could send them easily, I would always request sides from a director producer. Having studied acting myself, to be familiar with the text means that you have some opportunity to play with choices so that when you come in, you're well versed and got a couple of options in your audition tool belt. And with, that's carried on through electronically, and even with a short film, send me the whole script so people can read everything before they go in, if they so choose. You're given the opportunity to even do more homework, and that's just from that actor place in me that, give you more details so that you can make more choices and you can be more prepared when you get there. Then again, cut to that whole new experience of video auditions with House of Cards, and because of proprietary reasons, they really don't want the information out in advance, so you're only given them when you arrive, which again is a funny cut back to, 20 some odd years ago when you could only get the script when you showed up because you could only get the script when you
Right,
showed up because it was even before faxing.
right.
So um, that at that point, you now have to work on a new audition skill to memorize quickly because in the instance of House of Cards, because it is again only that box that they're seeing, the more time you spend looking down, as if I look down during this interview, all you see is the top of my head. We really want to see your face and see, your choices, and then very specifically your eyes. So if you're memorizing and looking, or haven't memorized the lines and you're just looking at the script, then it's really a disservice to yourself. So you need to be a really quick study. So in the purposes of House of Cards, it was always you get them when you arrive and you have to be off book as swiftly as possible. Although I typically would always get things in advance, even if I've had to request, which I have from directors, uh, just even a dummy script for us to use for the purposes of the audition so that I can get that out in advance. And if you make changes for the job, great. But give me something that they can work with before we get there so we can actually play when they come to the audition and we can see some good work.
And so when somebody comes in to actually read with you,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that some of the things that you talk about is making sure that people read to the reader. Although I know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you also have like this little card with has like little eyes on it if there's no
Mm-hmm.
reader there, if if there aren't people reading lines back. But those are some of the things that people really need to know about, so you're not looking into the lens of the
Right.
camera and doing the
Right.
read. Of course, unless you're reading for an anchor or a reporter, something specific like that. Are there some other, very specific things that you would recommend an actor do or not do when they're coming in to read for you?
Well, I think it's always good practice because you may have some people who will tell you, and then some people who will just forget because, again, you've seen so many people in a row, is to always ask, kind of what's my frame so that you know which part of you is going to be seen. And again, asking where should I look? Because some people do have a differential. Yes, for a reporter, they may want you, even if typically for that show you're auditioning, slightly off camera, they may want you to audition to the camera. And asking, again, it just creates for you as an actor dialogue, that you're now having a conversation so they get to know a little bit of you, and the way you ask the questions is helpful to you. Again, it's creating this dialogue which may spark into another conversation, which may become a little more personal, which is helpful to you because now they know more about you. So in my particular case, after having seen some of the self submits, there's often that people are told to not look at the camera, and then they're just looking too far off into the distance. So you're missing on that perceived, you know, interaction between you. So it's better to look just slightly off, which is why I have that pink eye on the screen of my camera, so that it's alerting people to look just slightly off camera, which really keeps you engaged with the viewer. So I think, you know, even if you are doing them by yourself, to, you know, do a test and find that spot where it looks like you're still looking at the person you're reading with, but not looking dead in the camera so you don't have deer in the headlights.
You know, but it's interesting when you mentioned that conversation with the casting director.
Mm-hmm.
From the other end of it, as the actor, there's always this fine line, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
where of course you want to have some kind of human contact, you know, hello,
Right.
you know, and so like,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have to understand that the casting director is probably seeing, you know, 50 people that day, or you know, I don't know, the numbers
Yeah.
could change certainly
Mm-hmm.
from episode to episode. And so, you know, you don't want to start getting into talking about the Redskins and the Ravens and, you know,
Right.
world politics and, you know, any recommendations on how to lose 10 pounds kind of, like, they don't have time. You guys don't have time for that stuff. You don't want to hear it. So there is that fine line between being personable, and you
Mm-hmm.
also don't want to be a pest because, and I'm
Right.
sure those are the kinds of things that can help keep you out of an audition in the
Right.
future if you're seen as somebody, I just don't want to deal with him. You know, he's a talented person.
Right, because it's, oh, they're too chatty and it puts me behind, and then it's depending who you have to send them down the line to, that then it becomes a concern. Like, oh, if I'm recommending this person and then they, you know, get tangential in an audition and then it runs everybody else off. So it's often that it's not even necessarily what's your personal preference, but you do have to keep things to a minimum, which is why I tend to be a little more loose with that than most. But I think if you can find some legitimate questions to ask which start the dialogue, you can then follow the lead of the person that you're auditioning for, so that it may accidentally go into the, you know, what about the Redskins or something like that. And, you know, some of those conversations do become valuable because it becomes the thing that people remember about you. Is it that, oh, right, I happened to mention, because we got in this weird conversation, that I'm a vegetarian and now you're doing that. So then you remember people by these funny things. And so it can be helpful, but it needs to be legitimate questioning that may perhaps go tangential, and you probably should not be the person taking, you know, the right turn with the conversation. But
Because some
again,
of,
you want them to get to know you as a person.
right, and some of the, you know, very legitimate questions, like I like
Mm-hmm.
the you know, the question about the framing. Certainly too, you know, if there's a scene now on a television series, you know, part of your responsibility as an actor is to do your homework and research and make sure
Right.
you've watched, you know, a number of episodes. You know who the players are,
Mm-hmm.
the style of the show, how it's being directed, you know, how quickly the conversations are going. But
Mm-hmm.
if you are auditioning for a feature film and you're not one of the stars, they didn't write the movie for you, and you've got a
Uh-huh.
scene and it's with, you know, Jeff, and you have no idea who Jeff is. So
Right.
that would be a very legitimate question to ask a casting director. You know, could you tell me a little bit more? What is my relationship with Jeff? Which will
Right.
completely change it. So, yeah, I mean, if you have very legitimate questions to
Mm-hmm.
ask, things like relationships, maybe where in the story is this taking place? Is this at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
movie? Is it at the end of the movie? In the middle?
Right.
Are there any other kinds of questions that you feel would be very legitimate and okay, and any questions that you would, you know, just kind of cringe at and go, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that person just asked me that."
Well, I think the one cringer, particular, and again, I tend to be a little more liberal with these things, but you know, if there's a casting director who's been working on a show for a long time, and you're asking about the particulars of the show because you didn't watch it at least once to see the style, I would imagine that that would make them cringe and make them feel like, well, if you couldn't do research for this, if I have you playing a drug dealer, I have you playing this, are you really going to become that authentic? Because you can't even bother doing research before you audition. But I think the relationship question is definitely important, and maybe the precursor to that is asking how many takes, you know, are we going to have? Because I've made a choice here that I'd love to show you, but if you're really limited, I'd rather hear some information from you first about the relationship so that I can give you what it is that you want to see. So again, that question is allowing you to show them your choice coupled with what it is that they want to see, which is now giving you more opportunity to show them range. So I think when you can be really strategic and do everything possible to create more opportunities for the casting director to see what it is that you have to do, but it's again within the confines of what they're willing to give you in that space. So if because I hear from actors all the time when I'm saying third and fourth and fifth take because I really, want to see you nail, this audition, and they're like, oh, I get to do it more than twice. And I'm thinking, oh, somebody only lets you do it twice. So I think to ask that in advance would be critical because you don't want to go in and make the wrong choice and then you've taken your 2 takes and you're done. So if you know that in advance, you can showcase your talent and then say, and now I'd love to do it based on that relationship information that you've given me.
And so basically, so you would be fine if somebody comes in and says, "Look, I've got a couple of ideas for this. Could I try 2 different ways?"
Right.
That would be okay
Absolutely.
with you.
Absolutely. I'd rather know that somebody has done that than either assume and put them on the spot, because sometimes I will ask, again, having been trained as an actor, I know you should have 5 variations on, this theme. And then, I have put people on the spot, and if they're not seasoned in making choices, then they're caught off guard. So they don't have another option, and then they're trying to make the adjustment swiftly, and they can't, and so you'll just get the exact same read again. So probably better to have rehearsed it a little bit with a few different options, and then go in and get all the details to pull them back together, which is again rolls into the other point of don't be too married to your choice.
And that's a very important thing because if you keep, if you're a one trick pony and you
Right.
say, okay, well, let's try it a little bit different, and all of a sudden you're doing it the exact same way, it makes you
Right.
look like a very limited kind of actor, which you don't want to work with
Absolutely.
somebody like that because changes happen on sets.
Right. And again, it goes back to that point that was spoken about earlier on the program about being pigeonholed. And in some cases, to be pigeonholed initially, and then people see the kind of the breadth of your abilities and will then branch you out to other things. If in fact you continually do that, it just means, okay, they're very specifically good for this one thing, and their range is not going to be from A to Z, but maybe A to D. So it may then limit you just long term for getting in for other things.
Yeah. Now, do you find, is there, and I don't know if you really can pinpoint this, are there
Uh-huh.
certain patterns that you've seen from people who typically book jobs and certain patterns that you see in reads where it just doesn't happen and you see countless actors doing very similar things over and over and over again and it just doesn't work for them?
Trying to think if there's an actual. I think again back to the other point about being confident that my kind of tagline for auditions that should be your personal mantra is this opportunity is about doing a good job, not necessarily about getting the job, because you always get the jobs you're meant to get. So I think if you go in with that mentality that this is just about showcasing my talent and doing a good job, that you tend to be a little more relaxed and much more confident, knowing that it's not, I have to get the pie today. And I've told that to a couple of people, and I've seen that they really did readjust and that they were so thankful afterwards to say to take the pressure off of I have to get this job really freed them up in the audition. So I think that would be, something that if that's your mentality going in, it's really going to serve you better long term. So I feel it is those people that are coming in comfortable and I'm just coming to showcase my talent. And if I get the job, great. And if I don't, it's no big deal because I know you're calling me back. So that again is the other thing to that, that if you're going in just about doing a good job and knowing that it's really about getting called back, because in the end of the day, you just want to be called back either for that show or 14 other shows. So really go in to do that as opposed to, I have to get this job, which does create a certain element of tension within you, just from a psychological standpoint. Then I think the repeat of maybe not getting jobs is again coming in nervous because you are so focused on I have to get the job, I have to get the job, I have to do a good job today, that sometimes you're just not right based on who the other players are. Because all of it is this building on, particularly in House of Cards, for example, that there is an ensemble that exists. So even though it's this one role, it's just an add on to this ensemble cast. Even if you're not a big piece of it, you still have to fit into the mix, whatever, that means.
And it's funny because I have it's a slight variation, but it's pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
My mantra is I want to have a good time. That's my
Right.
goal, and because I realize booking the job or not book that's out of my control.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so, and I think what happens for me is number one, it makes the audition process much more enjoyable,
Mhm.
but also it makes me look less desperate
Right.
because my goal is not booking it. And just for full disclosure, I mean, I think I've auditioned 6 times for House of Cards, and as
Right.
of today, have not booked it yet. Well, I still plan to, but
Hmm.
just so that people understand, you've got a couple of different options, and I've met you know tons of actors who get very angry and they get frustrated and they go,
Right.
what am I doing wrong? They hate what I'm doing. And
Uh-huh.
what I try to explain to them is, look, if you're getting called back, especially, if it's the same show or even if it's a different show but the
Right.
same casting director, it's just the
Right.
opposite. That means they like what you did. Because if they
Right.
didn't like you,
And
why
you're
would they
just
bring you back?
trying to find something, for
Yeah.
them. So it's true.
And I love what you said about, you know, the part was not meant for you. Doesn't mean that
Exactly.
you couldn't have done it, but it wasn't the perfect fit. And when there is, especially in a show like House of Cards, there is an ensemble, and maybe you went in there, you read, and you did a great job in the read. Everybody loved you, but maybe you kind of look just like somebody else in that particular scene,
Yes.
and they needed somebody shorter, bigger, different ethnicity. Who knows? And
Right.
so, just the fact that you're getting called back again, that's a statement of they really like what you're doing.
Well, exactly. I think your point there in saying that you weren't right for the part, it doesn't mean you aren't right for other parts, you know. So, yeah, if that part isn't right for you, but you're right certainly for something else. Yeah, it is a marathon being an actor, so if you're not signed up for the marathon, I think you kind of need to readjust your thinking because it's the law of averages. The more you audition, the more jobs you're going to get. But so you have to be out there auditioning to actually make that happen. So
And I
that it's
think what
so
also,
specific. I mean, you can be too tall. I mean, isn't that ridiculous? But if you're reading with somebody and you're just too tall, you're just too tall. Or you could be too small, or you can be too white, or your hair can be too. Yeah, there's always something that comes into it. That the scene makes more sense if it's three men and a woman as opposed to. So there's very silly things sometimes that come into play.
well, and also there was a feature film that I auditioned for, and as it turns out, I did not book the job. And when I saw the movie, it was an African American woman who got
Right.
cast.
Well,
So
there you go.
who knows sometimes, what ideas go in there and what changes, and so that's why trying to book the job, it's a silly kind of way to go about doing it because you don't have control. All you can do is do a great audition,
Right.
um, and try to enjoy it.
Well, very
Okay.
specifically from my perspective, that sometimes if you're not getting a job, it may be that I put you in, as I always call it, as my wild card, is the person who isn't at all what they were asking for, but I know your abilities and talent may be something that engages them. So that it's just giving me an opportunity to showcase you as an alternative option. And then what may happen is you may not get that role, but then, on House of Cards, I'm submitting them to Julie Schubert, and then she's submitting them to Lorraine Mayfield, and then David Fincher's looking at them. There's a line of people. So at this point, if nothing else, I've just exposed you now so that you can get asked back for something else. And I did have that happen, that there was that person. It wasn't exactly what they asked for, but they were repeatedly asked for again because we were able to showcase their talent. And while they may not have actually been submitted, for final selection for a very specific role, they're now being asked back to come for other things. So I think it's just important to give yourself the opportunity to be showcased, even if you don't think you're right. If somebody called you in for it, it's because your ability may be the trump card to what the actual type is.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Joel, because I know we are running out of time with Kimberly. How about if we go to some questions right now?
How did
Absolutely.
the time go so fast?
I can't believe it's past 1 o'clock already.
So this is from Gail in Atlanta, and it's a real specific question, but I thought it was a really good one. If there is a scene where an actor drops to the floor or has to kiss someone, how should we handle that type of movement during an audition?
Wow, that is a fantastic question because I've had to audition on House of Cards very specifically some very intimate scenes for the upcoming season. And hopefully you have a casting director they're working with is very sensitive to some of those awkward moments that you have to incorporate. And it's tricky business on how it looks. So hopefully they're going to work with you to come up with something that actually looks appropriate if they're putting it on videotape only, because now you have to be, kind of pantomiming kissing somebody like that. But I think you just have to own it and go for it, and better to go big or go home so that it looks great. And they're obviously only going to send the best take, because again, it was some very tricky stuff I had to do, but we had to work through it a couple of times to find something that looked great on camera. But in the end of the day, despite the fact that they had to be intimate with people that were not there, we found some great stuff. So I think it's just a little bit of trial and error, but you have to go for it. You can't be tentative. Better to, again, go overboard with it and then be able to dial it back than not do enough, because then you look awkward, scared, and we get back to that nervousness doesn't make people on the other end feel comfortable. So,
and I'm assuming you wouldn't recommend them trying to grab the reader and start kissing them.
well, oftentimes I've been reading on the other side of the camera, so the camera is between us, so you wouldn't even have the opportunity. However, depending, you could be in a situation, and if there is a reader in that case, I always like to find an actor as a reader who's going to be fine with that, and I will, whenever possible, if there is scenes, I happen to like to read actors together. And if you have a client that doesn't have as big of a budget, it allows us to be auditioning two people at the same time so you can see people over the course of the day. So I would say, yeah, with your scene partner, if you have somebody you're reading with and they're willing to do that with you, absolutely, because you're now creating the environment, and it's really hard for a director to get past any two other people together if they like seeing the two of you. So it really depends on the situation. That if you're in an opportunity where you can do that, fantastic, but if you have to do it on your own, go for it.
Now, as far as the other part goes, if there's some, because she had mentioned something about dropping to the floor, if there's some
Right.
physical movement, I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to all of a sudden start playing around with cameras and following, people and things like that.
Right.
Even things like with, picking up a cell phone, you're taking a phone call. Do you,
Right.
prefer to have somebody actually do those movements, hold the phone, hold a pen, paper, or do you just say, hey,
I
I know
like
what a
when
cell
there's
phone?
that element of realism, because it also, there is this certain awkwardness, unless you're great, at pantomiming, that it's really believable. And again, most people are not. So I think to have those props is great, but it's a matter of, again, we really don't want to fumble in your jacket and get it out. So there's a certain element of let's cut out reality, and that your phone's already out and that you're already engaged with it, or just that it's out of sight and handy and you pop it in, because things can become too cumbersome. So I think you yourself, if you get those sides in advance and know that that's there, you can all practice in front of your own little camera. So, do a couple of takes. It's not like now you can't do that homework before you get there to know what looks good and doesn't look good. So,
Yeah.
I would say just rehearse all that. And the dropping to the floor, I'm sure you would be given a direction from a casting director. Let's omit that. Unless, of course, somebody really wanted to see that, and they're going to give you the direction, because it just becomes a bit too much.
And that would be one of those legitimate questions to ask a,
Right,
casting director. What would you like me to do with,
right.
in this scene?
Exactly.
But the
Hmm.
one thing when we were just talking about pantomiming, I mean, one of the things that I've heard from casting directors is that when people start pantomiming a lot, all of a sudden, phones that they were, supposedly holding in their hand kind of disappear, and now
Right.
all of a sudden that's what you're watching. What's going to happen with this phone? What happened to the phone?
Uh-huh. Right.
So I guess once again that would be a good question to ask ahead of time. What do you want me to do with this? Just disregard
Right.
it, or actually hold a phone in my hand?
And it is keeping in mind that when, again, this end user is the videotape in your little box here, and that on most television shows, our establishing shot with all of that stuff and action going on is typically very brief, and then we get into three quarters and close-ups and then extreme close-ups. So too much business is just too much business unless it's really specific to that character and is going to be what sells them on hiring you. So probably less is more even in that arena.
Great. Joel,
Great.
do we have time for a
This,
couple more?
yeah, I want to get through maybe three or four more if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
I'll try
Sure.
to go real quick. This is from Jess in Dallas. You must get so many submissions from actors. What is it in a headshot that causes you to decide one person from the next? Is it particularly the resume or who their agent is?
Again, that's a very subjective question, so it's keeping in mind that what casting director are you sending things to. And I tend to like photographs that have a really genuine hire me or call me. So there's something really warm and inviting in them, regardless of what the character that you're trying to portray in that is. That if it's not a really warm and engaging photograph that somebody looks at and the overriding essence is call me, hire me, or you need to get to know me, I think is important. And I mean, a line of demarcation certainly in people's resumes that if there is a talent manager or talent agent that you know, that may be something that draws you. But again, having studied acting myself, I feel like I'm much more inclined to, leave people's work to speak for itself. So if I am given the opportunity, I'm not looking at resumes and I'm just looking at faces and can pick people in that way. I don't even look at resumes. I prefer to just see what people can do. But sometimes, you're forced to do it. And I think those are just like anything in life. If your friend says go to a certain restaurant, then you go to that restaurant. So if there is a certain manager, certain agent, or maybe an acting school that you've gone to, that could be just a hook that if I can only see 100 people today and have 1,000 photographs, what am I going to do to whittle down that pack? So it's
Okay.
both.
This is from Trevor in Ohio. Do you expect actors to have their lines memorized for the first audition?
Which that was a great question, and I think it goes back to it depends very specifically on the show. And again, having studied acting myself, I feel like if you can get that skill down, it's going to serve you well in the long run, simply because you're now putting yourself one step ahead of the other people you're auditioning with, because now you can go in and not only, if you're given the opportunity more than those two takes to actually do something, you can play with it because you're actually memorized. So it's easier for you to make adjustments because you've memorized your words and now you're just working on, intent. So I would suggest it, but I understand that everybody's not a quick study. So as much as you can, it's
And
better.
just to kind of add a little comment to that, if you don't really have the lines down, you're going to be much better off at just periodically glancing at the sides
Right.
as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to kind of getting stuck in the middle of the audition and all of a sudden your eyes start rolling into the back of your head like a shark. You're trying to figure out what's the next word. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you can have the lines memorized, that would be
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. But if you
Right.
can't for whatever reason, make sure you're very familiar with them and then periodically, you'll glance over and just grab a line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and if
Last
nobody's
question.
ever
Oh,
taught anybody that technique, just to go back, if you aren't memorized on your lines, fold in the side of the script so you can keep your thumb on your line so that when you take your hand away from the page, slide your thumb to your next uh, set of dialogue so that you don't lose your place, because that definitely will happen a lot. And I don't know who taught me that technique, but I shared it many, many, many an audition.
I do that in my
Considering,
acting classes as well. Yeah, I think it's a
yeah,
great
which I have
idea.
no idea where I learned it, so thank you to whomever taught me that, but I've passed it on.
great. Last question from Alice in Virginia. What are your thoughts about an actor wearing a lab coat while reading for a doctor or a farmer wearing overalls? Is that making the actor look less professional, or can wearing the proper wardrobe help the actor?
If I was very specifically answering about House of Cards, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Because again, we're only looking at that videotape and you want to be what they're buying today. And if they're looking to buy a doctor and we have somebody who comes in a t-shirt and then there's somebody who's reading a lab coat, just inherently before you open your mouth, you are a doctor. So I think check out who you're auditioning for and what the role is and see if they want that. And in the end of the day, again, if you want to be what they're selling if you come in that way. Now, if you're too much of a caricature, then it may be foolish, but I think to really give the essence of what it is that they're looking for on top of your abilities is going to be helpful. And I always use as an interesting, throwback to that when people say, no, absolutely not. However, if you're going to be a 1950s diner waitress, that's a very specific look. Now, who's to say if I showed up like this for an audition that somebody could imagine me with a beehive and a little, with the apron and the hat and the whole nine? Could the director actually imagine me like that? Even if my talent is off the charts and somebody else comes in dressed impeccably like a 1950s diner waitress, she was the waitress. I could be the waitress, but she was the waitress. So I think you need to find that balance of what's really going to sell it for you that day.
And just to add in one other little thing, that's also
Mm-hmm.
a question that I ask casting directors. I have
Mm-hmm.
been in some situations. I'd say it's really more in New York. And I've heard people in LA say this as well. Look, you don't have to do all this stuff. I want to see if you can act. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I also have been in tons of auditions where, Kimberly, just like exactly what you said, I want to see that person. So, what I always
Mm-hmm.
do is if I'm auditioning for a doctor, I'll bring a lab coat with me and I'll
Mm-hmm.
ask, hey, is it okay
Accurate.
to put this on? Because I feel more like a doctor. I look like a doctor when I'm
Right.
wearing that lab coat.
Uh-huh.
And if for whatever reason they say no, I say, okay, that's fine. And I guess like the key thing, just to answer your question, is don't dress inappropriately. I think that's probably the
Right.
safest thing to do. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, especially in with commercials too. I mean, I like the idea of knocking people over the head so they don't have to use
Mhm.
their imagination. And I look like the person as soon as I walk in the room.
Well, and I have a great story to that because I was auditioning for a project for the FDA, and we needed to have a pregnant woman for the actual show for Text for Baby, FDA, blah, 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 all this stuff. And there really was a pregnant actress. Great. So we called her in, and at the audition, the director then said, "Oh, so and so, is here. She's pregnant or something." And I thought, "Oh, no, 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 that woman's coming tomorrow, not today." And so then I go back into the waiting room and I see the actress. I said, "You're not pregnant, are you?" And she said, "I'm not telling." And I said, "Oh my gosh, you are not." So she was the first actress they saw, pregnant as she could be, with her fake belly. And she was cast in the end. There was other people who read equally as well as her. And even the real pregnant woman did not get cast because she was the first pregnant woman they saw. She was fantastic. So they bought her as the pregnant woman from the get go. So they could not get out of their mind. And I never told them until after the audition was over that she really wasn't pregnant. She was cast. So, she took it one step further and, kind of practiced and sat down like she really was pregnant. I mean, she sold it from the minute she walked in the door as a pregnant woman and she got the job. So, to the point of should I dress like the role? Well, she did and she got the role.
That's incredible.
Hmm.
Hey, well, Kimberly, I wanted to thank you so much
Oh, my
for
pleasure.
taking the time. Really,
Hmm.
really appreciate it. You're wonderful. Can't wait to audition for you again in the near future. And really, your information is just great. I really, really want to thank you so much.
Well, certainly in closing, I want to tell people relax and think about getting a job, not the job you audition for, because you'll get to the job you're supposed to. So,
Fantastic. Thank you so much again.
my pleasure. Thank you.
See ya. Okay, so first of all, what a great day just learning from some different types of industry professionals, learning about the audition. What I wanted to do here is actually get into more specifics about the audition when you're getting the sides. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. And at the very end, I'll open things up in case there are any other questions. And by the way, just as an additional bonus, um, you will be receiving the PDF of this entire PowerPoint. So that way you don't have to sit there and scribble notes and you'll be able to refer back to it. So let's say you're fortunate enough, you get a side sent to you, you're going to be going to an audition, and here's what you want to do. And I mentioned this before. You want to make sure, first of all, if it's a television show, you do your research and you know who the players are and you really study the show. If it's a film, then I would look up the director and make sure you know the style of the director. You can go to IMDb, Internet Movie Database.com, and learn about the director, see what movies he or she has done. You can see little clips so you get a better sense of their style. But let's just say you get the sides here. You're going to be reading through the entire script and you're going to read it as the audience. You're not acting, you're not an actor at this point. You are simply reading it as the audience. And one of the key things is you want to look at the bigger picture. What kind of project is this? Is this something that's dramatic? Is this a comedy? And you also want to know what is the purpose of the scene that you are actually reading. Why is it in the project? You know, is it developing a plot? Is it giving you more information about specific characters? And also, what does the audience get out of the scene? Here is probably look, all this is very important. This is probably the most important part as far as the actor goes. And it's the very last one that I have on this page. Whose scene is it? And what I mean by that is, because it's crucial, you have to know, is this scene about you or are you a supporting player here and you are helping somebody else out in the scene? So, like for instance, if you are um, a bartender in the scene and the star of the movie comes in, sits down at your bar, and you've got a couple words to say, what would you like? Can I get you something? Well, the scene is not about you, it's about the star. And so you need to make sure that you do not try to make the scene about you. And I've seen actors make that huge mistake at auditions where they try to just build themselves up and make themselves sound powerful and deep and, intense actors. You know, you're the bartender and you're just asking, is there anything I can get for you? That's really it. So make sure you know who the scene is about. Okay, so let me go to the next slide here. And I'm just going to run through this really quickly. You'll be able to see this. The reason why I'm giving you these details about how many pages films have, broadcast TV and cable shows, it's helpful to know where your scene is taking place in this project. Is it at the very beginning? Typically, if it's going to be in the middle, things are starting to change. Things are really happening. If it's like 3/4 of the way through, there are all kinds of twists going on. So anyhow, I thought that would be helpful for you guys to know about. Is there anything in the sides that tells the audience more about the scene? And also you want to be looking at, what kind of dialogue is taking place? Are people cutting each other off in the way that they're talking? Is it very quick? Is it rapid? Are people taking their time saying the lines? Because that will help you determine how you're going to be doing your audition. And also, is it factual information? For people to learn more about the scene. And I had mentioned this earlier with Kimberly as far as what kinds of questions that would be legitimate questions to ask. What is your relationship with this character? Now, if it's a television show, you should know that. Because you've watched the show, you've done your homework, you know who the stars are. If it's a feature film and you're not one of the stars in it, you might not know. So that is something you need to know about. What is your role in this particular relationship, and what does the other character reveal about you, about your character? And it's funny, in my workshops I do this whole talk about this, and I'll do it very quickly here, where there have been some actors, I'm certainly not going to mention any names, who will get the sides, they will highlight their lines. Those are the lines they look at. They don't even read at the other person's lines because they don't care. It's all about them. And then they go in and do their read. Never do that. I mean, you want to read everybody's lines in the sides, because quite often what you'll find is it's the other person's lines that will help give you a tremendous amount of information about your character. So that's why I have this particular line in here. Here's something else that a lot of people don't really keep in mind. Whenever you're doing your audition, you want to make the casting director or whoever sees your audition really believe they are in the middle of this scene. They are there. So one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, how is your character physically and mentally coming into the scene? So a good example would be if there is a business person and it says, Jim is walking to his office. Okay, so that's how the scene starts. Well, that gives you a tremendous amount of information. I mean, don't just take that little piece of information lightly, because if the scene said, Jim is running down the street, to get to his office, you want to create that feel. You want to create that scene so people believe that you are just comfortably walking in. If you're running into the office, maybe you're a little bit out of breath. There's a little bit more tension in there because you're running late. You also want to see, is there some kind of change to the character? And you will see it in the sides. And if so, where does this change take place? And feel free, take a pencil, mark up your sides. Notate little changes for yourself so that you know where these things are happening. Another really important question is, why did they choose this scene? And why did they see me, for this particular role? And that will also help you understand not only yourself, but also understand what is taking place in this scene. One little piece of business that I wanted to mention, and I find this is happening more and more, where I am asked to sign, they're called NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. And I've done this a number of times recently. I never did before, but now I'm doing it. It's not unusual at all. Basically, this is what this document is all about. When there is, whether it's a TV show or a feature film, and they are casting, they want to make sure that the actor who's going to be auditioning for this project does not give out any information about the project to the public. They're concerned if you are sharing something that's happening in this episode before it airs, you're going to ruin things for people. You might, somebody dies, somebody gets married, somebody, leaves. Who knows what's going to happen? Somebody starts dating somebody else. They don't want that information to go out. And sometimes you will be forced, you will be told you've got to sign a non-disclosure agreement even before you audition for it. And you've got to take that very seriously. And there was a feature film that just got released that I did. It's called Philomena. And I had a scene with Judi Dench, who was just phenomenal. And they made it very clear I was not allowed to talk about this project until it was released. They didn't want me to say anything about it, who was in it, what my role was, nothing. It was up to them to decide when they want to start to publicize and let the world know about it. And the other thing too is if you are going to be doing, especially something online, you're going to be doing a home audition, never, and I'm going to say never, 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 never post that information through any kind of social media. Certainly don't put it up on YouTube. Don't put any information on Facebook. It's just, besides it being illegal after you sign the NDA, it's just not smart business, because when people find out you're doing it, you look very unprofessional. And believe me, I know sometimes it's hard. You want to just tell everybody, hey, I just did this project, or even just auditioning. Hey, I just auditioned for this, for the show. They don't want you to do that. And if you sign the agreement, listen to them. Okay, shooting home auditions. Look, I could do an entire workshop just on shooting home auditions. Just a couple of really key things, because it's really important for you to know about this, especially if you're going to be auditioning for TV shows or films. Couple of things. You've got to make a few investments. It doesn't have to be crazy expensive. If you own an iPhone, you could actually use that. I mean, I don't. I use other things, but something that's going to give really high quality. You will need 3 lights, and as you can see in this little example here, I've got one fill light, one key light, and I have like a little light in the back, and I'm still experimenting. It's funny, sometimes the things look different on different days in the room. Sometimes I will shoot this bottom little light right here towards the screen. Sometimes I'll shoot it towards my back if I'm seated in here. And then there also have been times, actually I've come up with this really, I think a pretty ingenious thing. I've got this file cabinet right here. The door comes out and I stick the camera right on top. Actually, it's my MacBook laptop, which has a great camera built in. So that sits on some cardboard sitting right up here, and it works out really, really, really well. I also have a camera, but I just happen to like this HD camera on my laptop even more. And sometimes I'll take a white piece of paper and kind of stick it below the laptop, and I shoot this. It bounces off there into my face. So I try out different things just to get it right each time, and I'll play with it a little bit. But you want 3 lights. You will need some kind of microphone. I used to use a lavalier mic. They're pretty expensive. You can buy them for like 20 bucks on Amazon. Once again, my laptop, the sound is great, so I don't need that. And you want to make sure you have a real clear background. I have this thing set up here. You could buy pretty inexpensively a green screen, a blue screen. You can get white as well, whatever works best for you. And you need to have a reader. That's essential. I remember one time trying this, and the agent who I sent it to first before I sent it in was not real pleased with it. When I told him, actually, honestly, he didn't really know until I mentioned it to him, but then he said, nah, you can't do that in the future. What I actually did was I had to get something done that day. There was nobody around. My dog is really smart, but she doesn't read lines real well with me. So what I did was I took out a little cassette tape recorder. I read the opposite lines, and I timed it out really well. So I hit the play button, and I would do my lines, and then my recording was doing the responses, and then I would come back in. I thought it was a pretty neat idea, but it was made very clear to me: don't do that. So you have to get a reader, and whether that means finding other actors, maybe if you have some kind of small group of friends, who get together and help each other out as readers, that's always great. The trick is you want to make sure the other reader doesn't overpower you, that they are sitting right or standing right by the camera. You don't want to be looking off to the side of the reader. If I'm doing the audition right now, here's where my reader would be, right there, or maybe even right there. So I'm looking there, and then I'm looking there to the reader, and that's where I'm going to be delivering all my lines. So anyhow, I just wanted to give you some general ideas about what takes place for home auditions. You don't have to be, a cinematographer. You don't have to spend a fortune on lighting. You could probably do, especially if you're going to be using, some kind of iPhone or something, and you already own the phone. You could probably spend averaging $150. The other thing that you want to have, and you'll see here that I have, you get lights that I just forgot the exact name of them, but they don't heat up. They have those little coils. They're great. And then you want a diffuser. I have this going right over here, so it softens things out. The key thing is you want people to be able to see your eyes. You want people to be able to see your skin tone really well. And you want to show maybe at least from the chest up. If you are standing up, you can do a little bit more, maybe a little bit lower, but at least from the chest up, so they can see you, they can understand you really well. And just one other little note, and I'm going to jump from here. When you finish the audition, make sure that you can easily edit, out some bad things, and make sure you know how to name your audition properly when you're emailing it out. And normally the casting director or your agent will tell you exactly how to do it. Everybody does it differently. Sometimes it's first name underscore, last name underscore, character underscore, or project, underscore, and then agent's name. And typically it's going to be sent out as an MOV, but once again, they can let you know specifically how they want this done. The 5 W's. This is something you're going to be using for every audition. It's the who, what, where, when, why. You need to be able to answer all of those W's very specifically. If for the who, and I ask you, so who are you talking to? And you might say, well, I'm talking to a group of people. The more specific you make your answers, the more interesting the read's going to be. What are you talking about? Where is this taking place? Because that will completely change the way that you do your read. If this is taking place in a bedroom, is it taking place in a large living room? Are you walking down the street? Are you walking down Fifth Avenue in New York? Well, your voice is going to change drastically. Remember, create the scene at the audition. You want people to believe that they are there. When is this happening? Is this happening at 3 o'clock in the morning? Is this scene taking place at 12 in the afternoon? It's going to be very different. And why? Why are you saying this to this person? So once again, ask these, answer them, and the more specific you make them, the more interesting it's going to be. As far as what you're going to be doing now. So make sure you've got the right materials. You need to have a great headshot. You need a strong resume. And when I say strong resume, I don't mean to say that you've got to show that you've done 28 feature films and you were starring in them. They have to be in the right format. You need to know what things are appropriate on the resume, what things you should never have on the resume. Then you want to find an agent who can start submitting you for projects or websites. And we talked about this earlier with Michael. websites that post auditions, companies that post auditions, and will actually even email you the auditions so you can begin getting submitted for projects. Let me show you a few of them. It's funny, Michael mentioned Actors Access. 800 Casting is phenomenal. It's probably the most economical one, and the services are really, really good. But here are a bunch of different places that you can go to get information. Some are free. Some will charge a nominal amount depending on what kind of services you would like to have. But like I said, you'll have this in a PDF, so I'm just going to kind of zip through it right now. So the workshop's over. I know you've got a lot of stuff running through your head. You were just hit with tons of information right now. What are you going to do? You want to begin marketing yourself. You've got the materials. You want to start sending things out, whether it's to casting directors, to agents, producers. If it's more commercial work, you'll send things to advertising agencies, the art and creative directors there. And remember, there's no rush on this. Enjoy the process. Take your time, because you're going to be doing this for the long term. And just like I think it was Michael who said, it's or maybe it was Kimberly. Actually, I forgot. It's not a marathon. These are slow jogs, and these things take time, and you're going to be getting lots of experiences. And certainly continue to study, continue to buy books that are going to be helpful to you. Take classes that are going to be very helpful to you, and study with people who are actually doing the work, people who've had the experiences that are going to be really helpful to you. That's what you want to be doing. And so just to kind of wind up the day, this is going to be the last workshop for 2013. There's an incredible schedule set up for 2014, and I'm going to be sending you all kinds of information about that. But I just wanted to let you know that I do offer private mentoring sessions online, and I've been doing for a year. I think I'm going to increase. I'm not for a year, for a month. I think I'm going to increase it to 5 a month. I've just had a lot of people ask me if I would spend time with them online, where I can look at your headshots, I can look at your resume, I can create your resume with you online. I can help you, whether it's with monologues, whether it's cold reads, helping you find agents, photographers, and really take all the guesswork out of doing this kind of work. And all you have to do is you can simply go to my website, it's howtomodel.com, and click, actually all the information is right here, howtomodel.com, and simply click on the mentor link. And I even have it set up where you can pay in installments. You can make small monthly payments if you don't want to pay all at once. But if you're really interested on taking your work to the next level or getting started properly, I can just save you hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars and really putting you in the right direction. So contact me as soon as you possibly can so that I can set aside a date for you starting in January, because December is, actually I do have one more date in December. But anyhow, if you're really interested, go to howtomodel.com, click on the mentor session. So anyhow, I'm Aaron Marcus. I just wanted to let you know this was a great day. I love the guest speakers. And one of the things I love about doing these workshops, these online workshops the most, is that I learn a lot, which is always great for me. I love the questions that came in. You guys were phenomenal. You will be getting a copy, or you'll be getting a link to a copy of this workshop. It should be sent to you within 3 days. So anyhow, this was wonderful. If you do have any questions at all, always feel free to email me at Aaron, Aaron, at howtomodel.com, which is also right here, right on this page. I'd be more than happy to get back in touch with you. Have a great rest of the year, and can't wait to talk with you again soon. See ya.